Lois Lansky, a popular American writer of children and young adult fiction. She was born in October 14th of 1893. Her father was a pastor, and her mother was a school teacher before she got married. Lois had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. She was the 4th out of 5 children. She was born in Springfield, Ohio, but she grew up in Anna, a small town in the west of Springfield. Most of Lansky's childhood memories are from this small town. It was such a small town that Lois had to do a daily train trip to Sydney, Ohio just to attend high school. Lansky's family moved to Columbus, where she joined Ohio State University. Like her mother, she studied to become a teacher. Other than taking just educational courses, she also took as many art courses as she could, such as drawing and lettering. She graduated in 1915 with a bachelor's in science. Once Lois had her science degree, she decided to move into New York to continue with her studies. She then joined the Art Students League. After a while, she continued her studies in London at the Westminster School. After all that traveling, Lois came back. That's when she got married to Arthur Covey in 1921. Lois became a stepmother of Arthur's 2 children, Margaret, who was 12, and Laird, who was 4. It wasn't until 1929 when she finally became a mother. She gave birth to Stephen, and then the family moved into a farm in Connecticut. They lived there for over 30 years. Lansky wrote and illustrated her first book in 1927, named Skipping Village. An interesting fact about this book is that when she wrote it in the form of a verse. The thing is that the editor pressured her so much into turn this book into a prose that she changed it. Of course, she kept some of the original verses in between some chapters. Another fun fact about this book is that if you pay close attention to the back cover of the Skipping Village book, you will be able to notice that there's a house. Well, the architectural style of that house, it is very similar to the one where Lansky lived when she was a child. Phoebe Fairchild was a book published in 1936. This book won the Newbery Honor Book in 1937. It describes the life in the 1830s in Connecticut. Now I'm going to talk about Lois Lansky's most famous book, Strawberry Girl, which won the Newbery Medal in 1946. This story takes place in Florida, and the main characters are 2 families, the Boyers and the Slaters. The Boyers moved to Florida, and they want to raise strawberries. And that's when the conflict starts, because the Slaters already raise cattle. Suddenly, one of the animals of the Slaters' farm ruins all the strawberries from the Boyers. A lot of conflicts are in between these 2 families. So that makes the book very interesting. Something that I really enjoyed about this book are the illustrations and the story itself. It makes pretty obvious why Lois Lansky won the award for this book. This is one of the most interesting books. One of the things that I really liked and enjoyed is that you can actually identify yourself with the conflicts that these 2 families have, because you identify yourself with the issues, and it also has a very important message, because at the end, once these 2 families start to get along, it makes you realize that no matter what differences you may have with another person, there's always something that you can do in order to fix all the issues that you have. Some of Lois Lansky's other famous books are Indian Captive Book, The Story of Jemison Stokes. It was a Newbery Honor Book in 1942. Also, the Bio Suzette book won the Best Juvenile Book Martha Kinney Cooper Ohio Library Medal in 1942. Another very famous book of Lois Lansky is Meet Mr. Small. This book she wrote was inspired by her son, Stephen. She said she was impressed on how her son and all his friends didn't take the time to give personalities to the trains or the planes that they used to play with. They focused more on being the drivers of the trucks or the planes, but they never give any type of personality to the actual trucks or planes. That's why she got inspired and she wrote this book. The hero of these stories is Mr. Small. He becomes an aviator, a sailor, an engineer, a farmer, fireman, all the activities that you can imagine. He even became a cowboy, policeman, and even a father. Lois made different stories about Mr. Smalls, and if you notice, all of the books have the same colors. The colors that predominate these illustrations are red, white, black, and blue. Lois Lansky was a very talented writer. She wrote and illustrated children's books, but she also knew how to write poetry. However, she did clarify that from the 1930s to the 1940s, she was focused only on her books, so she didn't write any poetry during that time period. Most of Lansky's poems were written in the 1950s and the early 1960s. She was very ill in 1952, so all physical activity was restricted to her. That's when she focused even more into her poetry, while resting in bed. In 1949, Lansky wrote verses for songs. It wasn't until later that a composer interpreted her songs. She was very excited that Clyde Robert had interpreted her songs, and she decided to focus even more on her poetry. On December of 1964, Lois Lansky published a different type of book, a book of collected poems, named The Life I Live. She said that that is the happiest book that she's ever published. She said that this book hath a lifetime of love and devotion to children. She also said that most of the poems that she wrote were very spontaneous. They just came to her mind in unexpected places at different times. She even gave some examples on where she wrote the poems. She said she wrote them in the kitchen, in the garden, at the supermarket, at different places. They just came to her mind and she wrote them. Her poems are the legacy to the children that she loved. Arthur Colby, Lois Lansky's husband, passed away in 1960. Lansky sold a farm in Connecticut and made her home in Florida. She continued writing and published her autobiography in 1972. In September of 1974, she died in Florida at 80 years of age.